Hi, I'm your host, Praveen Ravisankar, and this is the Data Standard audio experience. We have a very exciting guest today. On our podcast, we have Pranav Sharkarn, who is currently a senior data scientist at Mediaocean. Today, we're speaking about what it takes to be a successful data scientist in the current climate. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Corinne, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, of course. We're really excited. And go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Pranav, and I work as a data scientist in ad tech, which, is a pretty emerging field right now, right? There's a lot of ad tech companies out there. But yeah, and the reason I wanted to do this is I love talking to other people in the space. And I did want to talk to a lot of people who are just starting off in data science about what they would need. Because when I started off, I was completely clueless about what I would need to be successful, right? And I'm hoping that someone else could make a more educated decision when they step in.
Yeah, I guess I'm part of the clueless batch that you mentioned. So as a data science student myself, I know that a lot of what we learn in college and school is heavily theoretical and doesn't directly translate to the workplace. So I was wondering, what should emerging data scientists set focus on in order to have success in the industry? Any tools, languages, ideas, anything you have.
Yeah, so I think the tools and languages can always be learned, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the big focus, and I'll tell it from my perspective and what happened to me when I stepped in, right? I think when most people think data science, they think building machine learning models, right? And that might be exciting, and that might be the most exciting part of data science. But there's a host of other stuff around it that's really important to master, right? So I think the three big things that I think anyone who's stepping into data science should master. One would be how to build influence with teams outside of engineering and data science, right? That could be product, marketing, sales. And how do you communicate your ideas to them, right? How do you communicate what a p-value is? And, how do you communicate p-values in layman terms? How do you communicate randomization and A/B testing? Why do we need randomization and A/B testing? I think that's a very key piece in trying to build influence with them, right? I think the second component is the ML models, but what I see is a lot of people jumping into ML models, but they don't have the fundamentals mastered yet. The fundamentals, let's just say the mathematical fundamentals, right? I think that's a key piece too, because a lot of organizations don't have a ton of data, right? Some of them do, some of them don't have a ton of data. And if you don't have a ton of data, you can't jump into deep learning, right? In other circumstances, you need to be able to explain your models, right? Completely depends on what product you're building, of course. But if you're building a product where the client wants to know the what and the why, if you're giving them an insight and they want to know the what and the why, you'd have to use a simpler model that can explain that, right? So I think having the fundamentals, mathematical fundamentals is very important, and being comfortable around reading charts, reading numbers before you dive into implementing deep learning, right? I think the third most important thing that a lot of people miss out, especially if you're trying to build models and trying to put it into production, is that process of just putting a model into production, right? The data engineering that goes beyond all of that, the feature work, and we hear about this a lot, right? We hear about feature work that it takes to get the data into a model, but also the process of deploying the model itself. How do you maintain that entire pipeline and keep it healthy? How do you monitor the models? I think that's a really important piece. And you see in a lot of places that's becoming its own role, right? It's called ML Ops now. It's kind of like DevOps, but with ML. So it's really important to be able to build influence with software engineers and DevOps and all of those guys too, right? you might not need to, so you need to have a handle on Kubernetes and Spark and all of those frameworks. You might not need to know it enough to an extent where you're doing it yourself, but you need to know enough so you can have a conversation with them about what your model would need, right? I think like those three things are pretty key. And when I stepped in, it was all about like models. So
Yeah, I guess like I didn't really know that communication was so important, like for a data scientist, like to other teams, right? And kind of to build off of that, I know you touched base on this a little bit, but for data enthusiasts trying to get into the industry, mostly they want to be like a data scientist, and that's all really that they're focusing on. But how have you seen like these data teams constructed in the past, and what roles are commonly underappreciated?
yeah, that's a good question, right? Because I think like all of the roles that are there are pretty vital to that entire pipeline. But when we do talk about someone being a data scientist, I think the first myth that we need to dispel is that there is just one role called data science, and that's completely not true, because depending on the industry and depending on what the product is, the role of data science differs widely right now, right? And data science is just used as a buzzword to get more applicants basically into your roles, pretty much, right? But that being said, I think there are a few broad variations in this data science role, right? I think there's one role that focuses on building models and communicating more with like cross-functional teams. Sometimes this role is called a data analyst role. And it's really important. It's a pretty vital role because you need to really build up your communication skills there, and how you present data, right? How you present data such that they can actually take advantage of it, right? I think another broad role you see is where you're doing the modeling, right? And you're working a lot with software engineering to put these models into production. For example, let's say Uber has, let's say they have a machine learning model that predicts how much time it's going to take for your driver to get there, right? I'm just making it up, but that would probably be a role that involves more modeling and working with software engineers, right? I do think that both of these roles are rapidly converging, right? Especially with AutoML now being upcoming AutoML, which helps you automate most of the modeling process. Yeah, but I think it's very important for you. You could like step in, try to flavor these different roles early on in your career, and then pick a path that you want to take, right? Do you want to be someone building more influence and being on the analytics side, or do you want to be doing the modeling side? And you can add value doing both, right? You can add like you can add equal amounts of value doing both.
That makes a lot of sense. And I know you touched base on this at the very end of your answer right there, but even though like the data industry is relatively new, it's constantly evolving, especially with like new positions such as ML ops and even like these automated models that are like basically doing the fitting for you. And so what are some important trends that you see in the industry of machine learning and data science, and what can people do to prepare for the changing environment?
Yeah, for sure. I think some of the really exciting stuff I've seen of late is in three fields, right? One is AutoML, which is basically automating a lot of the vanilla machine learning algorithms that we see out there, right? You could use AutoML to, fill in missing features, try out, fix hyperparameters, find the right hyperparameters. But I think from a data scientist point of view, I think it's something that data scientists should embrace, because it only means that they get to do more with less, right? So if it's like an easy problem that needs solving, they can use an AutoML framework. Anyone who does not necessarily have a data science background could also use AutoML frameworks to solve the easier problems. But does that mean we're going to stop solving the hard problems?
No.
Nah, I don't think so. Because the goalposts always keep moving, right? every company wants to do more. We're always going to move. We keep moving towards a world with more and more convenience, right? So AutoML is great, and there's going to be more focus on more complex algorithms, right? Algorithms that were 10 years ago that were really hard to do as now can be done pretty easily by small companies. Yeah, so I think in the next 10 years, so AutoML is one side of it, right? I think I'm also pretty bullish on deep learning, especially with advances in NLP, right? Most of you've seen like BERT and transformers and how they've actually revolutionized a lot of stuff that's being done today. I think I would also focus on that, but I wouldn't dive into it until I get the basics, right?
Yeah.
So like make sure you understand what backpropagation is, right? You don't have to like do the math, but make sure you understand the math at least like twice. That you'd really get an appreciation for not just deep learning models, but you'd also get an understanding of how optimization is done, which is also a big part in this umbrella called data science, right? It's not just ML models, but it could be like optimization and stuff like that.
Okay.
I think like the last bit is data scientists trying to understand infrastructure a lot, right? Especially with Docker and Kubernetes, deploying containers have become really easy, right? And microservices is all the rage now, right? Every DevOps team wants to move to microservices. So trying to get an understanding of that infrastructure would be like really helpful. And there are tools out there that automate the ML infrastructure for it, right? SageMaker, and I think Google has one. So I think you could also leverage that depending on what the size of your team is.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess this is a little more specific to you. So as someone who works in the marketing and advertising industry, how does the data strategy differ from other industries, and maybe your approach to the data as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's also this misconception, right, that among different industries, you need to have you do need to have domain knowledge in order to be successful at your job. But I don't think algorithms that are used are different across these industries, right? I don't think forecasting algorithms, whether you go to like marketing or you go to finance, I don't think they differ all that much. I think if you're trying to do optimization and you're using linear programming, I don't think it differs all that much, right? So I think like you need to understand those fundamentals, and you need to have an ability to ramp up quickly to whatever industry you're working in, right? For that, I would recommend like reading a lot, right? So you're working at company A, make sure you read about everything that's out there about ad tech. Make sure you read about who your competitors are and what they're doing, right? And that's the quickest way to really ramp up and getting domain knowledge.
We at the Data Standard are building a community of data enthusiasts and data thought leaders. Everyone is open to collaboration to connect with one another. What can our community do for you?
I think it would be really helpful. I don't know if you guys organize, you do organize ML events, right?
Yeah.
Where data scientists can come speak about what they're doing. I think that would be really helpful. And I think that community should be opened up to not just people doing modeling, but also someone who could explain and teach newer data scientists how to put a model into production, the entire end-to-end cycle, right? So it doesn't always have to be complex models, but it has to be, well, it's a simple model. How do I now scale this to 1,000 different marketing campaigns, right? How do I build it in a scalable way? I think like that's important too.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and I guess thank you so much for being on our show today. We really, really appreciate your time, and I enjoyed our conversation. Where can our community find you online?
I think you can reach out to me. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Definitely.
I'm like fairly active on it, so.
Sweet. Well, great. And thank you so much for your information. And thank you for coming on the Data Standard. You can find us at www.datastandard.io. Thanks for joining and have a great day, guys.
Thanks, Praveen.